On this episode of Money and Power, we talk about pimps in Congress, ethics, and getting lit in an Abercrombie and Fitch. But first, Kid Ink.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on? Yeah. Really ain't nothing I can drop that. Wake up in the morning, make it all okay.
Welcome to episode 11 of Money and Power, our weekly look at questions related to finance, politics, and culture. I'm your host, Nathan Martin, and joining me from Michigan, a financial consultant and host of the Rob Talks Money podcast, Rob Johnson.
Howdy.
And joining me in studio here in the crown jewel of rural Ohio, a rabble-rouser, a chef extraordinaire, a curator of red hens, Jeremiah Martin.
Hey, sorry, came in early. Hey.
We are professionals, and together we are the trio of talk, the triad of the tittle tattle, and the triumvirate of the tete-a-tete. So glad that you guys are here joining us. We have quite the show planned for you. As the young kids would say, I think it's going to be lit AF. That's what they
lit,
say,
fam.
right? Nope. No backing up on my... Okay. All right. So, how have your guys' week been?
Not too bad. Just keeping busy, making it happen.
Pushing paper?
Yep.
Also what the kids said in like 2005. So, you're awful quiet over there, Rob. How was your week?
It was good. It was, well, so far it's only Tuesday, but so far it's been good. No complaints.
All right. Well, when I say the week, I mean like since the last time we actually talked. So, getting all official on us. But
Well, it
Those
was
Mondays,
the same,
though.
Yeah. It was. So the last 7 days then have been equally fine.
Okay.
They've been adequate.
They were mediocre. It was a malaise, but we got through it. Got it. All right. Well,
Just like this introduction.
just like this intro, in the show notes, it says, do this intro. And usually, we're kind of snappy and we're chatty. And this week, we were not. So maybe lit AF is not the appropriate moniker for what is going to happen on the show. So we're getting it where we can. All right. So we have quite a show planned for you guys. We're going to be talking. We're going to be doing news bits, of course. We have a Meme Busters, bringing back the Meme Busters this week.
Oh, yeah.
And our main topic is a pretty cool topic. We're going to be talking about business ethics. Yeah. So everyone wants to stick around for that one.
Yeah, just hold on tight for that one. It's going to be quite a ride.
Quite a ride. All right. So without further ado, now is time for a look back at the weird, the inane, the general happenings going on in the world by the crazy people who just happen to live here. News bits. All right, Jeremiah.
All right, so starting it off this week with, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what this is, but we will roll with it. So this article begins: white woman calls cops on 8-year-old black girl illegally selling water in front of her home. Illegally, in quotation marks, there. So a white woman was caught on tape calling police on a young girl selling water in front of her home in San Francisco as the city experienced a heat wave. In a video posted on Instagram, the camera woman narrates as the tape captures a woman calling police on an elementary school-aged child. So long story short, it was a heat wave. She was trying to make a buck, entrepreneurial spirit, selling water outside of her home. But big government stepped in and said, you can't do that without a permit. And this lady, affectionately called #PermitPatty by the internets, stepped in and said, nope, absolutely not. This is illegal. I'm going to call the cops and enforce this big government tyranny on our lives. So what say you folks?
Well, this is there's a couple angles of this, right? So first of all, this is a follow-up kind of, it's almost like a sequel of the lady who called the cops on the people that had a barbecue around in Oakland, right? And I can't remember what her moniker was. Barbecue Becky, I think, is hers. And she became a meme. And because she was a white woman calling the cops on a black family trying to have a barbecue. And, people were saying it was racially motivated and all that stuff. I don't know about any of that, but this is kind of a follow up to that. So there's a similar thing. A white woman calling the cops on a black young lady trying to sell water.
Right.
So that's the first angle. The second one is kind of reminiscent of all these stupid have a permit for lemonade stands.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. When you talk about follow ups, we've seen a lot of these different stories crop up from across the country where little kids have lemonade stands that are shut down because they don't have the proper permit or the proper paperwork.
Right. And there's a lemonade brand, and I can't remember if I should know, but they've basically come out and said, hey, we will pay the permits. Country Time. Thank you. Country Time has come out and said, we will pay the permits for anybody who wants to have a lemonade stand because it's a fundamental American right, which, good on Country Time. But they shouldn't have to do that. It's kind of ridiculous. You shouldn't need a permit to sell water on a hot day. You shouldn't need a permit to sell lemonade. You shouldn't need a permit to have a garage sale. These kind of things are just, I say it's big government run amok, but it's really not. It's not the feds or the states. It's these like big government wannabes at the local level run amok who just want to kind of enforce their will on the populace that's under their control.
Well, just because it's local level, does that make it any less big government? It's still government imposition on our lives.
Right. I suppose it's a matter of terms, right? I guess when I think of big government, I think of like the big government, not the little wannabe at the local level. But
so, if there's Uncle Sam, would this be like Cousin Terry?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Cousin Terry or Rob's cousin Wayne at the local level, just messing with people's lives.
Yeah, get out of my business, Wayne. Like, leave my lemonade stand alone.
Yeah. Wayne, why are you messing with us? Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so when I first read the article, I thought the way it was worded, at least the headline, it made it sound like this girl was setting up shop on someone's front lawn. But when you look at the video, it's almost like it's a high-rise in San Francisco and a bunch of families have apartments. So that's even more ridiculous to me. So everyone's in this apartment, and this little girl literally has a cooler full of water, and she's selling water for like $2 a bottle. And this lady has to call the feds in to wrestle this little girl to the ground. It really didn't happen, but it might as well, metaphorically it did, because she was shut down. So I didn't get it. I thought it was like, who cares? To me, it's not a big deal. But I thought it was kind of ridiculous that it's not even, if it was in my front lawn, like if someone was setting up shop on my front lawn, I'd probably just tell them to move. I wouldn't call the police and be like, it's not like it's a violent crime. It's, she's selling water. Settle down.
And if you look at the video, she's got a cooler with wheels and a handle. Like, you cannot get any less imposing than that. Like, you just move to the other side of the sidewalk and you just ask people, hey, would you like a water? $2. And then you can move right back over to the other side. It's less imposing than a lemonade stand. Yeah. Like, it's not an eyesore. The whole story is ridiculous. I did think that the wording in some of the articles that came out were a little bit it's ridiculous to begin with. But there was an inflaming wording used. But it's at the core issue. It's ridiculous. So
it is. Although I did hear that Time Magazine is putting her on the cover and stating that she was beaten because she was black. So there's that.
Welcome to America.
Coming to the Time Magazine near you. But no, she just selling water.
Yeah. Thanks, California.
Yeah. California, right? San Francisco. No, so both of these happen like California. And it's like they love the regulations over there. They're just sticklers for the rules, those Californians.
Also, I mean, San Francisco is like the epitome of tolerance culture. And yet,
you know what that girl needs to do is start selling her ability to shovel up homeless person poop. She would make a killing. That's what she needs to do. All right, Rob.
Yeah, moving on, Rob. What do you got?
All right, so I want to give a bit of a disclaimer. So if you are not able to hear things that are a little bit violent, I'd encourage you to fast forward for about 2 minutes, just especially if you got kids in the car. I'm going to talk about the making a murderer case for a minute. So it might get just a little bit graphic. So I just want to make sure that if you have kids that listen, which I don't know why you would, but
especially with you swearing all the time, like who would actually like we're constantly getting threatening letters from Apple saying, are you sure you don't want to make this explicit? Like,
yeah, I'm a regular Gordon Ramsay.
He said AF.
Yeah, that wasn't even me.
It's Abercrombie and Fitch, right? That's what we're in.
No. Lit as Abercrombie and Fitch, which means it's gonna be boring as hell. All right, so Brendan Dassey. So for those of you who don't know, Making a Murderer was a documentary that came out as a series, 10-part series, that came out on Netflix in 2015. And the case followed one man named Stephen Avery and how he was convicted for rape, and he was sent to prison for 18 years, and a DNA test reversed that judgment and exonerated him. And when he got out, he filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and as that lawsuit was pending, he was arrested and later convicted for the rape and murder of a young woman, her name Teresa Halbeck. So basically, Brendan Dassey was Stephen Avery's nephew, and he was also convicted for rape and murder because he had confessed to it of his own free will. Now, what happened was the documentary painted a picture as though Brendan Dassey was coerced into giving his confession. I don't think he was. I think it was. I think he was very confused. He's not. He's a very low IQ individual. He doesn't have a lot of cognitive abilities. But basically, his case went to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin for appeal, and the Court of Appeals in Wisconsin turned him down. So this was like the fourth court ruling, and it went to the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, and they decided not to hear the case. So it looks like Brendan Dassey is going to be in prison and he's up for parole in 2048. So this is a very controversial court case, and they're also looking to make a follow-up to Making a Murderer, kind of a part 2 on Netflix. So I thought it was a really interesting case and really interesting development if you guys or any of the listeners follow it.
Yeah, so my question is just kind of on the monetary side. Like, what first do you know if Wisconsin has any laws against inmates making financial gain off their crimes, and if he gets anything from Netflix for these documentaries?
He does not.
Okay. So that was my question. I just, because when you hear, hey, we're going to have a follow-up to Making a Murderer and stuff like that, that's the first thing that pops in my mind, because obviously Netflix is throwing out a lot of cash for these things. So I just wondered that. And that was really my only kind of question on that for the case.
Let me caveat that the family has made money, so his parents have made money from that, but not him directly. And I think the reason for the follow-up documentary was because there's been a lot of appeals, and his attorney, I forget his name, but they've been actually doing tours, kind of like live shows, doing Q&As talking about the case. So it's demonstrably popular, and people really love it. So I think they're going to do a follow-up and just kind of touch point on where where all of the appeals are going.
Gotcha. So this is kind of the end of the road for that, or do we think there's going to be other items?
I think they're done. I think they both did it personally. The evidence definitely does not lean in their favor. I know the documentary paints one picture, but the documentary did cover up a lot of things. I'm not going to get into all the details, but they did flat out tell some falsities to the case in the documentary, which when I watched it the first time, it seemed, oh wow, they really screwed this guy. But upon looking at the details and the crime scene photos and what was actually taken, it seems like they were the ones who did it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks for that, Rob. So my news bit, big news, you guys. He styles himself as America's best known pimp, a strip club owner who runs multiple brothels and looks set to win a seat as a Republican in the Nevada legislature with the blessing of many conservative Christian voters. So obviously this is Dennis Hoff of Cat House fame, an HBO series that kind of goes into his little brothel there, or so I've heard. The article's kind of the headline's kind of interesting. In the age of Trump, evangelicals back self-styled top U.S. pimp. It's a little interesting because if you look in the article, it doesn't really have too many examples of people doing so. But that's kind of the thinking there. The research director, the one thing they do quote is the research director for a public religion research institute, who has said that some of these tribal values is leading people in that district to vote for him.
Isn't this the epitome of correlation versus causation? I mean, just, he happens to be a Republican, and so in the age of Trump, therefore, I mean, they make kind of a leap there to say that essentially it's either Trump caused this to happen culturally, right. Or it's Trump voters that are supporting this guy, and like you said, I don't see a lot of evidence of that in the article.
Yeah, I mean there was a pastor, I guess, that was quoted that Hoff would protect religious rights or whatever. I mean, it kind of seems kind of like a hit piece. It actually seems that the people are more upset that evangelicals just aren't in mass supporting Democrats everywhere in the age of Trump, which seems to me, and we've talked about it before on this podcast, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in mass, and and it has little to do with being for our candidates and against the Democratic candidates and what they stand for and their values. In fact, 538 actually had a really good piece on this just today, I believe, on that most people actually support their party because they oppose the opposing party's values versus just supporting their own party's values. And that can get into some really dangerous tribalism, I think. But I kind of wanted to have a general question. So, would you vote for this guy if he was running in your local state legislative seat?
This doesn't matter as much considering the context, but for clarification, is this a primary?
It's the general election. It looks like.
So he won the primary.
That's my reading of this. Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, so I mean that's a bigger problem to begin with, but I mean my answer to that is no.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. But Rob,
yeah, I wouldn't vote for him either. I think you made a really good point, Nathan, when you said that the fact that this just occurred during Trump's presidency does not mean that his terrible douche-like behavior started in 2016. He was a tool long before 2016, and I'm sure he'll continue to do so. Unfortunately, this is a good example of. And the frustrating thing is not so much that he's running. I mean, anyone can run, and that's fine. The irritating thing is that evangelicals support him out of not wanting to vote for Democrats. I mean, you can not vote for either candidate. You don't have to vote. You don't have to pick one. If those are your only two choices, then write someone in or just stay home. It's not a one or the other. If you don't like either candidate, you don't have to vote. Similar in 2016 for the general presidential election.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I do think that while it's a stupid situation to begin with, I do think though that it says something about the lack of support for the Democrats, that there are people that feel like that is their choice, that they have to vote for this guy over the Democrats. And I think it's a scathing review of the Republican Party's choice in this case, but it's also a scathing review of, our alternative isn't better in that kind of, Republican Democrat binary. So it's kind of scathing on both sides. And I think that this is one example where both parties, especially local parties, need to kind of take a reality check and look at the man in the mirror, so to speak.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. A pox in all our houses, as they were.
Yep.
So, all right. So that has been raucous news bit segment there. So Jeremiah, you have a meme for us to bust.
I do. Return of the Meme Busters. So this is little bit backstory on this situation. So several weeks ago, the Supreme Court ruled on the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, where, as you recall, a cake maker, cake artist, as he calls himself, in Colorado, declined to make a specialty cake for a gay wedding. And the Colorado Civil Rights Commission basically ran this guy through the ringer, fining him and nearly causing him to lose his business. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it really hinged on the fact of him. It was a religious liberty case, but it also hinged on artistic expression, and there was a lot of facets that went into that. But ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Jack Phillips, and in a 7-2 ruling. But then, most recently in the news, there was a restaurant in Virginia that refused service to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the press secretary to the current Trump administration, and basically said, "We don't agree with you. We don't agree with anything that Trump stands for, and so we do not want to serve you." And so this meme, bringing it up right now, this meme, which we will post on social media platforms, has the option between two buttons, and there's a guy sweating to decide which is going to be his option. And on the one side, it says Christian baker must bake cake for gay couple. And on the other side, it says Red Hen, which is the name of the restaurant. Red Hen has the right to refuse service to Sarah Huckabee. And there's this guy, and he's labeled a liberal, that is sweating trying to make this decision, and it's it's apparently a false dichotomy, and has to be able to choose one or the other. And what's interesting to me about this is the rhetoric on both sides. I think that there's inconsistencies on both sides, and so I just wanted to pass it to you guys. What are your thoughts initially, and is there aspects of this meme that we can bust?
So for me, the dichotomy is only there. It can only be a dichotomy if there's actually a dichotomy that exists.
Right.
And the issue that I have with this on both sides is that the two cases are not analogous. So they're not the same at all. And so it is possible to be against one and for the other and not be a hypocrite. Okay. So, because again, they're not directly tied. I think that Robbie George, he kind of put it best. He said it would have been the same if the Red Hen restaurant had refused to cater an event that Sarah Sanders was holding, promoting the awesomeness of separating children at the border. Right. So if they had said no, we're not going to cater that, then that would be at least similar, because they were doing it. Flat out refusing service at a restaurant is a different scenario. Now, let me get a little nuanced here. We've long talked on this podcast that our view is that a business owner should have the right to refuse service to anyone.
Right.
We're in our argument has been that we're in 2018. And so if you are a racist douchebag, people are going to realize you're a racist douchebag, right? The market can decide that. Now, those levers probably didn't exist. Definitely didn't exist to a certain extent in the South in the Civil Rights era, where a lot of these laws and legislation stem from. So, and another thing is, even if you say today that is an accurate reflection, it's not to say that you're against those particular pieces of legislation because of the time period they were done in. We have to be able to have a little nuance within the discussion.
Right. I think one of the important pieces to remember is that a lot of misinformation around the Jack Phillips case. A lot of the rhetoric is that he was refusing service to a gay couple,
right?
Which is not true at all. His policy is that he serves everyone. In fact, he had multiple times where people basically trying to trap him, get him recorded, saying something or doing something. They would come in, which first of all, this would never happen, in normal conversation. But they would come in and they would say, "Hey, I'm gay. Will you sell me a cake?" And he was like, "Sure." And there were actually gay people that came out to say, "Hey, I actually support Jack in this case because he doesn't refuse service to anyone on a personal level. What he does is he serves all people, but he doesn't serve all events." Is the way that he says it. And so this is not just simply this isn't even something related to gay marriage necessarily. He has chosen not to make Halloween cakes, and so people are being quote unquote discriminated against if they want a Halloween cake. He will refuse them service based on that.
Those pagans.
Yeah. Also, he's had people come to him and want to make a cake for keep in mind these are custom artistic expressions. These are custom cakes for divorce parties, and he said, "No, I won't. On personal conscience grounds, I won't do that either." And so it's important to understand that he was not refusing service to an individual based on individual traits,
right,
or actions or behaviors. He was choosing not to use his artistic expression in a particular fashion. So to your point, it's not analogous at all.
Right. And so that's point one of why it's not. Point two of why it's not is how the people handled it. Okay, so she tweeted, "I was asked to leave and I left." Okay. She did not sue the pants off the owner and wish them financial ruin and harm.
Right.
Now.
And to our earlier point, she did not try and sick big government on them.
Right. Hey, I'm going to take this to the local Civil Rights Commission because, whatever. So I think that there are different cases. So it is possible to say, you know what, they were wrong in refusing service, but, it's okay to have an actual religious conviction. So it is possible to have opposing view. It's also possible to say, you know what, Jack should have served a cake, and we should be able to kick people out of a restaurant. It is possible because they're not the same. I think one way has more of a principled leg to stand on, but the market is taking care of it with some really interesting Yelp reviews.
What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, I've always been of the mindset that a business can operate however they want, and as you said, Nathan, the market's going to correct it. If you want to open up a Klan bake shop and laundry service in the middle of Detroit, go ahead. It's not going to stay open very long, and the people will respond accordingly to to what the business is. My question is why even tweet this? Why would she even make a case out of it? She was refused service because of what administration she's in. Carry on. Why politicize it? I get drawing a contrast to the liberals in the cake shop and tolerance and people, and businesses just serving the cake or just serve Sarah Sanders or whatever. But I never understood the whole idea of politicizing it just to do it. And that's seemingly how it came off to me.
Well, let me ask you this, Rob. I mean, if it was one of us in this room and we tweeted a relatively benign tweet related to this, that we went to our local, personally, okay, my wife and I, we've been looking for houses to rent, and we've been denied because they found out I was in the military, which in Ohio, military service is technically a protected class, and we could have done something about it. We didn't because we wouldn't want that type of person to be our landlord anyway. But if I had tweeted that and I said, hey, this is kind of odd, so-and-so refused me service, or even if it was, that's related to a protected class. So once again, not exactly analogous, but if we just went to our local thing and I said, hey, I was, denied service because they didn't like my political views. Isn't that though exactly what we're talking about with the market dealing with it? This only works in 2018 because we have the internet and we have social media and we have this kind of massive word of mouth machine known as social media that we can utilize to to get the word out about these things. So right, wrong, or indifferent, isn't that exactly what we're talking about? And would your opinion be different if one of us in this room did it, and so wasn't quite as inherently politicized, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that is her letting the market know what needs to be corrected from her perspective. That's a fair point. I think the difference between one of us doing it and her doing it is, one, she has 3 million followers and she can politicize and scale issues easier than one of us can. And also, I would suspect, and I don't know her, I don't know how the tone, or you can't read that into a tweet. It just seemed like drawing a stark contrast to what happened, on the left. Whereas if it were one of us, I don't think we would be using that to politicize and attack another party. More so, just doing just what you said, which is having the market correct itself. So that is a fair point.
Well, and it's a matter of why the owner specifically said it was because she was a member of the Trump administration.
Yeah.
So it was the owner that politicized it.
That's a fair point.
If she had just walked up to her and said, you know what, it's best that you not eat here, then I think it would be a different situation, right? Who politicized what? And again, listen. If you're an owner and you don't want to serve, if you don't want to serve Republicans or conservatives at your restaurant, please post that in the window. Feel free. I mean, be honest about it. That's fine. If that's your stance, be proud about it.
Right. And once again, I mean, that's not the type of business that I would want to engage with anyway. In the same way that that's not the type of landlord that I would want to have, that, wouldn't want me as a tenant. Well, I don't necessarily want that as my landlord. And so, once again, the market's going to handle it. What's very interesting about this is when I was Googling, I was looking at a couple different memes. I knew we wanted to talk about this issue. I was looking at a couple different memes and looking on Facebook and Googling. And one of the things that I found that was very interesting is there was a Red Hen restaurant, and I forget where it was, but it was not in Virginia.
And Red Hen DC.
What's that?
The Red Hen DC.
Oh, okay.
Not affiliated.
Yeah, and they were blasting all over social media, just so everyone knows that this is a different Red Hen and we are not affiliated. And so they may or may not have gotten some backlash.
Their social media, whoever's doing those social media is earning a keep. I think they even quoted like our canopies are the ones that are clean or something like that. Because someone posted on Yelp. Did you see that Yelp review about the canopies? It's like the outside it's this guy in Colorado who wrote this Yelp review, right? and he's like, and the outside is not clean. Even the canopies. He's like, don't even get me started on the canopies. So of course Donald Trump tweets out about the canopies at the Red Hen.
No,
what I was wondering about that is which one came first. My understanding was that the Trump tweet came first. Oh, so the guy was playing off of that.
I saw the Yelp review first.
Gotcha.
But this may shock you. Scrolling through Yelp.
I don't follow in my tweet deck the president's tweets on a regular basis. That may shock everyone.
Rob, I like that. I like that image that President Trump is getting his material from Yelp. That's
yeah,
I kind of like that.
That happened to me, not the Yelp thing, but one time I was inside of a credit union. When my grandfather passed away, I was doing his estate stuff, and I was inside of a bank that I've never been in, and they had said, "Hey, have you ever thought about using your 401k to cash out to take a vacation?" It was like one of their advertisements. So I took a bunch of pictures of it, and I was on Twitter and doing the market thing, and their Twitter was the exact same as the Los Angeles Federal Credit Union, but theirs had like an extra letter in it. So I'm lighting these guys up for like 3 days, and
yeah. So please tell us about all this Twitter restraint that Sarah Sanders should have, Rob.
Yeah.
How dare you politicize it?
Well, they write back and they say, "Hey, I noticed that you're from Michigan. I think you might have been talking about this credit union." I'm like, "Oh, you know what? You're right." I said, "So what's your stance on 401k withdrawals?"
Oh man, that's amazing. But one last thing I wanted to bring up about this meme. I agree, Nathan, that these issues are not analogous, at least not perfectly. But while there needs to be distinctions made. And we can't, like most memes, it's the reason we do this segment, that, things are often more nuanced than can be described in a single meme. That being said, I think that there are points that need to be discussed on both sides. And my issue with the way that not all, I think generally speaking, I think that my conservative friends, especially on social media, have handled this situation with a lot more, let's say, grace than my friends on the left handled the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. But that being said, I have seen some reactions that are like, "This is ridiculous. This is hypocritical. They should be fired. They should close down, et cetera, et cetera." And I think it's important for all of us to be consistent on these issues. And whether regardless of your political leanings, I think we need to be consistent. And on this podcast, we've talked about pretty consistently, like, hey, businesses should be left alone to kind of do their own thing. And ultimately, if they've got bad hiring practices, if they've got bad practices with their employees, the market's the market. people will end up leaving. People are not trapped into being an employee at Walmart, for instance, or Taco Bell or McDonald's.
Right.
People are not trapped into, only being able to go to one restaurant or one, establishment, at any given time. So we have options. The market's the market. Allow it to happen. Ultimately, we should all be able to freely associate with whoever we want to freely associate. And in wrapping this up, if you have that bent that you don't want me as a veteran, or you don't want us as conservatives, or Rob as an independent, if you don't want us going to your establishment and giving you our hard-earned money, hey, let us know up front. We'll be able to divert our funds elsewhere.
Right. And this is actually a really good segue, I think, to our main topic.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be talking about business ethics, and specifically, as a Christian business owner, what kind of ethical basis should you have? Real quick, just as a kind of a tease on that, I don't think that a Christian business owner should refuse service to anyone aside from religious convictions, and there are some of those things we've talked about that. But I don't think they should refuse service to anyone because they should look at their business and their service, especially if they're in a hospitality service, as an extension of their belief system. So when we talk about Christian ethics, I think it's there. I think there is a rule for what ought to happen as far as the law. But again, when it comes to ethics and morality, I think that's a different set of rules that we need to live by. And it's okay to have differing views on what that actually contains. So there's the legal, and there's the moral, and there's the ethical. And those should be our, in the military, we call them the right and left limits, right? Those should be our right and left limits to make sure that we're going properly downrange. Rob, do you want to introduce our main topic?
I sure do.
I choose business ethics.
Name that movie.
I'm lost.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah, as soon as you say it, it's gonna dawn on me.
Yeah, it's Billy Madison.
Yes. Okay.
That's like the most played clip on YouTube for business ethics.
That says a lot, actually. That's actually a pretty good segue into business ethics. So I'm a big fan of our folks, our friends over at the Colston Center. And one of the things that they have as a resource is called Doing the Right Thing. Have you had a chance to view that, Rob?
Nope.
All right, so this is kind of my parting shot in advance because it's kind of a recommendation. I recommend everyone go out and get this. It's a video series, and it kind of happened right after the markets crashed, and they did a panel discussion about where we are in ethics and like why was there an ethical and moral breakdown that caused the banks to collapse the way that they did. And it's an amazing discussion. Some people on there, Robbie George, Chuck Colson's on there. He even talks about some of his stuff during Nixon and some of the kind of the moral failings there and the life lessons that kind of repeat itself through that. It is a TV series. It's a lecture series. I believe they did it at Princeton. So there's some students asking some pretty pointed questions. And I believe it's 6 DVDs. It's not too terribly long, but it is amazing to discuss the situation with ethics, specifically business ethics, in today. Basically, business ethics isn't really a requirement anymore for at least the way it used to be for either bachelor's in business or master's in business. And they kind of say, we don't even teach this stuff. We don't even teach the ethics. It's all about what's legal. That's what we teach. What is the law? And as as Chuck Colson kind of talked about, he said, I think he said in one of the things, basically he alluded to, I don't know the direct quote, but he alluded to the fact that if what is legal is your only ethical guideline, you're going to get in trouble really quick, because in business, not everything is spelled out in law. And honestly, rightfully so. Okay? Because we are small government conservatives. We don't want it to have to be completely spelled out in black and white in law text, everything you ought to do or not do as a business owner. That would be very cumbersome. But you have to understand that there's another guideline that you have to have, and it's a moral, ethical thing. And we just don't talk about it as much as we should. So, Rob, what are your kind of general thoughts on that piece before we get into like what is a Christian business owner's responsibility? As Christians, what's our role in business? What are your general thoughts on ethics and morality in business?
Yeah, so when I finished up my master's program in April of this year, and I wanted to go to a Christian university, but when I was picking colleges, it was tough to find a program that was nationally ranked. I found one. So I went to that school, and it was demonstrably challenging. And what was interesting about the school was that every assignment, the very first class I did, you had to formulate and articulate an ethical perspective that was going to guide you through the program. So they made you choose out of, the number of possibilities that there were, what your ethical perspective to business was going to be. And it was a full 9-week long class to decide this. And every assignment going forward, whether it was my thesis, whether it was case studies or research, had to be grounded with an ethical principle, no matter how small or big the assignment was. So that was huge for me, and that was able to give me some different perspectives on like utilitarianism, value and virtue-based ethics, which is the system that I subscribe to. And I think it's important. I think it's important to have that grounding when you are operating in any capacity, whether it's business or personal, that you have an ethical perspective that guides you. There is a deep sense of objective morality that we all have. Now, the origin of that is debatable. To me, it's not so much, but I think that the person who goes into business or even has relationships, which is practically everyone listening to this show, has to have some type of moral foundation to operate off of. And some people, you can use the house analogy. Some are built fairly strong, and others are very insecure and shaky. And as a business owner, it's important to go into these transactions and these relationships with having a firm foundation of which to operate off of.
So let me ask a follow-up question, Rob. As a Christian business owner, is profit the number one priority?
No, profit should never be your number one priority. The service should always be your number one priority. And the reason is because service dictates profit. So profit is a byproduct. It's not an origination. So it's always important to put service values, the things that we're talking about right now first, because profit will always be there. Money will always be there to a certain degree. But what's going to make your business successful is the relationships that you build with other people. And all of that comes from, the moral foundation that you operate off of, or the one that you do not.
Yeah, and I just want everyone in the audience to kind of grasp that, because what Rob just articulated is antithetical to the way that a lot of venture capital funds operate, that Wall Street as a whole currently operates. Now, it's not to say that Wall Street always operated that. I don't mean this to be like big bad Wall Street, but what he just said is antithetical to what is the predominant view of a lot of people in MBA programs all across the country. Profit is the number one motive. And so before I get into kind of that delineation, Jeremiah, kind of what's your general take on, business, morality, ethics?
So two things real quick, just to piggyback off what Rob said. I think that's a really important understanding that profit should not be the goal in itself. And I think what can happen, I also think this is kind of a misunderstanding about capitalism to begin with. And that is that profit is the end goal of capitalism, or the ultimate goal in capitalism. The problem is that a lot of these things that people accuse from small to medium to large corporations of is mistreating their employees or bad working conditions, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not to say that has never occurred. Obviously it has. But what you have to understand is, if your primary goal is profits, you can do some short-term things for some short-term profits, some really shady dealings, or treating people poorly, even customers poorly, for some short-term profits. But if you want there to be profits years down the road, or even months down the road, sometimes you have to be focused on that service. So that's just one thing that I think is so important to understand, especially when we're talking about business ethics here. But just kind of a broader take on the issue, I think it's so important to understand the difference between legality and morality, or legality and ethics when we're talking about this. Nathan, you mentioned right and left limits earlier. It's so important to understand as Christians that we're held to a higher standard. And when we talk about biblical principles, even just this goes back to service, but something as simple as treat others how you want to be treated. That goes to, if you're an employee, how if I was the owner of this company, how would I want my employees to treat me? How would I want my employees to, the ethics that they would maintain on a daily basis? If you're an owner, if I was an employee, how would I want my boss to treat me and to give me the respect that I want, and the working conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So treat others how you want to be treated, but ultimately that's only ever going to take place in a realm that's more confined than the legality of a situation. Because there's a lot of things that can be legal that at best are morally ambiguous, that are ethically gray areas. But if we are following biblical principles and trying to live out a Christian biblical worldview, that a lot of times that's actually going to be harder for us, because we're going to be in a much more confined space. That, all right, this may be very legal, what we're doing, but it could have disastrous results, both short term and long term, if we don't hold to those biblical values.
Yeah, and I constantly hear the term maximize your profits. And I'm of the mindset you maximize your service. That's what you need to focus on and do. And that's where a lot of bigger companies really start breaking down and failing. I've said it before in here, I'm a huge Disney file. I love going to Disney. I love the customer experience that they provide. But there was definitely a time during previous administrations over at Disney where the profit was quote unquote maximized at the expense of the value to the customer. And bring it back around to capitalism. I hate when people say they hate capitalism. They really don't hate capitalism. What they really hate is cronyism.
Yeah.
And if you are in a situation where you are maximizing profit over maximizing service, that's a form of cronyism. And capitalism is really an allocation of resources for mutual benefit. Parties should have mutual benefit. And it's not you're getting something so that somebody else loses. There's actually a scale of mutual benefit. And if you're trying to actually provide a service and provide that value to your customers on a consistent basis, and I don't care what kind of business you're in, then that positivity is going to shine through. Let's look at Chick-fil-A. Okay, so Chick-fil-A has been attacked viciously for their viewpoint in the market, right, Rob? In the free market, they have been attacked viciously for their views on traditional marriage and biblical foundations and principles. But yet they're flourishing. And why are they flourishing? Because even people who vehemently disagree with their stance on the issue realize I'm getting a dang good chicken sandwich. They are convincing a 16 and 17-year-old to be polite, to give me great customer service. Every time I walk in there, it is a unique but same experience that I am getting treated with utmost respect. It doesn't matter who I am, what I'm about. They're helping out in their communities. They're closed on Sundays because they actually care about their employees. And all of that reverberates through their entire corporation and their entire company. Dare I say, so going back to the original post, if you will, of our context of our conversation, Christ reverberates throughout that entire building. Everything they do, because they have made their Christian principles the bedrock and the front and center of their operational model. And so they've done it well. Now, a word of warning. What this means is if you put a fish on your business card, or if you're putting Christ front and center into your business, then you have an even higher responsibility to ethics and providing value to your customers and that reverberating experience than somebody who doesn't. So just keep that in mind. Like that is something that you're setting a high standard, which you should generally have anyways as a Christian businessman. But just be aware of that.
Yeah, I think just to kind of brag on one of our own, Rob has a business, RTM Solutions, and one of the things I've really appreciated about you, Rob, and the way that you run your business is as a financial consultant, as a trying to build that company and ultimately build your profits, but with the goal of serving people. You have a policy that you're not going to charge people for your services who are near or below the poverty level. Ultimately, with this idea of serving them, and the best way that you can serve them is to help them get away from their money problems, not digging them deeper with the additional cost of hiring a financial consultant. That's one thing I've really appreciated about you, Rob, and the way that you run your business. And I think that's ultimately what we're talking about, because I think that you could easily charge people at that level, and that would quote unquote maximize your profits maybe. But that's not the goal. The goal is to serve others and to kind of live out a life that exemplifies what we're talking about here. So just a shameless plug for Rob and his consulting business.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. That has been one of the most interesting aspects of this, of when I'm working with clients and whatnot, and they, we get to the end and they're like, well, how much is it? And I was like, well, it's nothing. It's free. They're like, no. Like, you say that, but what's the end catch? And it's like, there is none. If you're in or around the poverty line, you shouldn't be charged for financial services. I mean, that's just, that's just a fact. As far as my company's concerned. One thing I wanted to touch on real quick was this gentleman named Paul O'Neill. So, we talked a lot about Christian ethics and how service dictates profit, and this is a real life example of that. So there's this book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And in the book, he details one particular leader named Paul O'Neill. And Paul O'Neill became the CEO of Alcoa, the American aluminum company, in 1987. At that time, they were hemorrhaging cash. They were wondering if they were going to stay open, but they brought this guy who was treasurer coordinator for the government. He really didn't have a lot of CEO experience, and a lot of the board were very hesitant about bringing him on as CEO, but they did. And then they got to his opening remarks for when he was introduced to CEO, and he didn't talk about profit. He didn't talk about sales or opening more plants or how they were going to trim costs. He talked about employee safety. And everyone's like, well, that's weird. Why do we care? And his thought was, if they could handle their employees like they ought to be and treat them well and make sure they work in a safe environment, because it was very unsafe, then those things, doing that one step is going to lead to more profits, and the business is going to grow on its own if they take care of its employees the right way, the way they should be, the way they weren't taken care of before. He did that, and within 10 years, it was actually before that, but about the 10-year mark, they started to spike and grow, and even employees were contributing to the leadership process, and it was a complete transformation based on this one habit, this one thing that he did, which is focus on serving his employees, which ultimately served the customers, profit, to maximize the profits of the company, whatever they like to say. But that one thing really changed the dynamic of the company. And it wasn't looking at how can we make aluminum, cheaper and then mark it up more. It was how do we make our employees safer? And that one thing propelled the company to a new level.
Yeah, and I think we see this over and over again in business. So we're going to wrap it up there, but I do have some exciting news. We kind of teased this, I think, in episode 2. But for the next 5 episodes, we're going to be going through a leadership series and talking about different principles of leadership, and we're going to be having a lot of discussions around this, and it's going to be applicable to. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you're a business owner, if you're a parent, if you're a child, if you are, and if you have relationships whatsoever. This is going to be beneficial to you. So we're calling it a leadership series, but it's really going to be applicable to a lot of people. So I hope you tune in for that, and we'll have some resources and stuff available as we get closer to that.
On that note, I would encourage people to reach out to us at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Email us moneypowerpod@gmail.com. Send us a voice recording or a video on Twitter or via email, and we will definitely play that. But send us your leadership questions related to this idea of leadership and leading well, like Nathan said, both in business but also in family and relationships. And send us your stuff at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and moneypowerpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so speaking of transformational leadership, our Mount Rushmore segment for this week is the prominent business leaders that you kind of looked up to. Did I get that right, Rob?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
All right. So our Mount Rushmore of prominent business leaders. And since I always have you guys go first.
Point of clarification:
Yes.
are these living or historical or
either or
any business influences your top. I always put you guys in the hot seat first, but I'm going to go ahead and go first this week. All right, so my Mount Rushmore of business influences and business leaders. The first one I'm going to put on there is Walt Disney. I think he was a visionary, an exceptional American. If you look at some of the stuff he did for our military during World War II, and just a great patriot and a lot of that. Not to mention that he just fashioned out of whole cloth an entire industry of family entertainment. When the prominent entertainers of the day just didn't believe there was a need for that and a niche for that. So I'm going to put Walt Disney on there. My second one is going to be Sam Walton. I think that if you talk about treating your people right and treating your customers right, he did those things exceptionally well. Now, whether his legacy has carried on past him, that's up for great debate and will be up for great debate. But I think there's no debate about what that man brought to the table as far as caring for his people, genuinely caring for his people, and genuinely caring for his customers. The third one I'm going to put as Steve Jobs. So I'm obviously a somewhat of an Apple fanboy, but even more that he understood what customers wanted even when they didn't really know that they wanted it. So, before the iPhone, did we really think that we wanted an MP3 player as well as a phone, as well as like everything that our phone does? No, people would be like, "Why do I need this thing? I have all this other stuff." He just was a little prescient on things like that. The iPod and the direction that music was going, and just the things that he was able to grasp on. He also helped invest in a little unknown animated company known as Pixar, and when he was kicked out of Apple. So no, his reaches are far-reaching in that. And my last one, it's going to be completely different, but I'm going to go with Dave Ramsey. And the reason I'm going to go with Dave Ramsey is because his book, Entree Leadership, I think is phenomenal and really helped me at a particular time in my life. So as far as my personal business influences, I would be amiss to leave him off of my Mount Rushmore. So that's my Mount Rushmore. Rob.
Yeah, so mine are, I looked at it from perspective of when I was writing the plan for my business, which took about 6 months. I wanted to be really careful and concise and consider a lot of material. So these guys were pretty influential to either starting it or continuing it on. The first one is Mark Cuban. So Mark Cuban is known for his Shark Tank fame, but he has done a lot in business, and he is not a what some would call a CEO that was passed down from generation to generation. He really did do his own thing and coded his own first company, and then it turned into a radio show. And it's insane, his life story. But his book, looking at business the way he looks at sports, was really influential. The second person is Warren Buffett. So Warren Buffett is one of the richest men in America, but he is a very good depiction of what someone with wealth ought to do with it, I think. And he is very practical in his financial methodology. He is not a day trader. He does not time the market. He does not do all these crazy, ridiculous things that I would never recommend to anyone. He's very steady, constant, stable, and I appreciate that about him. The third person was a tie, but it was either going to be Gary Vaynerchuk or John Acuff, and I was going to talk about this when we talked about the Christian leadership thing, and this is a good example of two people giving the same message but with a different tone, and I think both of them have been pretty influential on how you do marketing, and they're both very effective. They just handle it in just a little bit of a different way. Neither one is right or wrong. I think they're both right. I don't think either one is wrong in the way that they handle their message for marketing and social media promotion and the like. The fourth one is Nathan, you said your fourth one was a little bit strange. Mine is as well. My fourth one is actually Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan has the most successful podcast in America. He has really done a good job of building, promoting that show, and it is a very good show. I don't agree with Rogan on a lot of things, but the way that he handles conversations and brings people of all types on, he has Alec Jones on one week, Sam Harris the other, Ben Shapiro another. He doesn't look at politics. He just looks at the person and wants to have a conversation with them. And a lot of his podcasting style I've put into my own, and I'm very appreciative of him, and he's been a tremendous influence on me, even if we disagree on a lot of things. I think he has a lot to say, and I think he's definitely worth a listen.
Excellent. That's excellent, Mount Rushmore.
Hey, Rob. So for number 3, did you make a choice, or did you just say both? John Acuff and
Gary Vaynerchuk would be number 3.
Okay. Gary V just pushing John Acuff just barely out of the way, huh?
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Until you text him later about what his choice was, and they'll say it was the other one.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I could not remember what my Mount Rushmore was last week. We talked about all 19 Pixar movies, and I just couldn't remember what I said.
So we promoted it on all our socials, as you said, Inside Out, and then I was re-listening to the podcast, and it's like,
So what did he say? What was
Up. He said Up on the podcast.
It was Up, yeah.
And we said Inside Out on. He
The
texted us
socials.
Inside Out?
Because you even put Up to him, and he corrected you on the text.
Ah.
That's a little inside
yeah.
baseball. All right, Jeremiah, what's your...
All right, so so I've got a couple familiar faces that have been already mentioned. I also put Mark Cuban. I'm a big fan of Shark Tank, and he's always been one of my favorite sharks. The stuff that he does on and off the show. One of the things I really liked about him on Shark Tank is you could just really see he's one of them that doesn't always, he does sometimes, but he doesn't always live up to the moniker of shark, because he's a shark with a big heart, if you will, and just the way that he pulls in entrepreneurs and even takes risk on people against the advice of some of the other sharks. I'm just a big fan of the way he's portrayed on that show, both on and off that show. He's been just a solid leader, and that's one of my choices. So next I chose Gary Vaynerchuk. Rob echoed some of these ideas, but one of the things I really like about Gary V, he's not for the faint of heart. If you take offense to F words every other sentence, but sometimes every other word. But to Rob's point, he's always got the content down. And one of his biggest things that he talks about is this idea of 51-49, and that's that he always wants to add more value to the person that he's interacting with. So at a bare minimum, he's going to give you 51 and never expect more than 49 back. And that's just a bare minimum. But the idea is always giving more value than you receive. Not even what you expect, but what you actually receive. And so that goes with him and his employees, with people he interacts with on social media, his customers, et cetera, always giving more value. And so he really plays that out. And if you can stand some of his verbiage, he's a good follow. But then staying with the current leaders, maybe this is my surprise pick, but I went with Jeff Bezos of Amazon. Now, not a perfect guy by any means, but a lot of people don't know how early Amazon actually started, in the early 90s, and he was one of the first people to initiate ads on Google and Google AdWords and such, and really from very early on built a brand into what it is today. And a lot of this idea of just forward thinking, using the internet, what it was originally meant to be. It's turned out to be something very, very different. But that goes back to his leadership style and kind of his forward thinking nature. And so that's that's number 3. And then finally, just kind of echoing some of the principles that Nathan said, Walt Disney is my number 4. I think there's probably very few people, as far as business leaders, that have affected our kind of current culture and current times more than Walt Disney, and really utilizing media and entertainment for a net good. And so that's my top 4.
All right, outstanding. So, any quibbles with anybody's Mount Rushmore?
No, I really like that you included Steve Jobs. That's a really good example of someone who did a really good job of building a company. He was very difficult to work with, left, created a turd that was next, and that company didn't go anywhere, and then went back to Apple and really did a lot of things that laid the foundation for what the company is today. So I really like that pick for Steve Jobs. No quibbles from me.
The only quibble that I do have with Steve Jobs is, I think one of the points of his legacy that's a negative is some people have attributed kind of modern day startup culture and kind of this leadership mentality of I know the right thing to do and push everyone else out of the way, and a lot of people have attributed that back to Steve Jobs. Basically, I know what to do, and it's okay if I'm a jerk because, A, that's what leaders do. And so, I agree with everything else. But, once again, none of these leaders are perfect. They all have their idiosyncrasies. But yeah, minor quibble, but overall, I'd say I agree.
Yeah, listen, I was always a big Mark Cuban fan ever since he invested in Turtles Tequila Company on Entourage.
Deep cut reference that most people won't get.
Google it.
But if you get it, you appreciate it. So
no, that was good. I think those are good leaders there.
Yeah, I think we got a good list there. I don't.
And
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and if you're listening and you want to tweet us your Mount Rushmore of business leaders, we'd like to hear about them as well. So go ahead and tweet us at Money Power Pod or find us on Facebook as well.
Absolutely. Awesome. Definitely do that, and we'll be pushing this out like we have our other Mount Rushmores. I love this segment. This is one of the best segments you've ever come up with, bro.
Thanks. You honed it. I said originally a top 5. You said, why don't we do a Mount Rushmore? And I think that was a good decision. I like that too.
Well, I don't come up with my own stuff. I just improve. What's that one company? It was like always the commercials, right? We didn't invent. We just made it better or whatever.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't recall.
Yeah, but I know Chick-fil-A says that too, right? We didn't invent the chicken sandwich.
Yeah,
we just made it better. Oh, whatever. That's me. I'm the. I just take other people's ideas and hone them. I definitely didn't invent the podcast. That's for sure. So.
Yeah,
but we're redefining it. That's for sure.
It came from iTunes, Apple. The iPod podcasts.
Yeah,
it's where the term originated. So take that, Android.
That's true. There's no Droidcast. Kind of weird.
There is not.
Although there actually probably is a Droidcast because I'm pretty sure there's probably some Star Wars person who spends way too much time on Star Wars.
Yeah. That's true.
They had a whole 4-episode arc on their podcast about how horrible Solo was.
Just 4 episodes? That's not enough. It's not enough for them.
Yeah. Well, their mom's basement flooded. So.
Oh yeah, they had to get out of there. That's right.
Yeah. So they're on a temporary hiatus, but they're coming back. All right. So feedback. We've gotten some really good feedback from our listeners, and I know that we have a audio clip to play from one of our listeners. You want to intro the clip, Jeremiah?
Yes. So this is my buddy Donovan. He's been listening to the podcast. I don't know how consistently, but I know he's at least listened to 1 or 2 episodes. But he did have a suggestion to us. Surprisingly, has nothing to do with Pixar. So we're not going to be money in Pixar. But he did have a suggestion for the direction of our podcast, and so I don't know. Maybe we should take it seriously. So
All right.
I was just going to tell you, I've got a great new idea for your guys' podcast. I think you guys, I don't know if you've heard this podcast called Serial. It's a great, true crime podcast. I think that might be the way of the future.
All right. So that's a good idea. We could do a true crime podcast.
I've always wanted to do a true crime podcast. It seems like a lot of work. Though I listened to this one show called True Crime Garage, and those guys said they put 30 hours per week into both episodes. I mean, that's a lot.
No, ain't nobody got time for that. So why don't we just make up one?
So on that note, that you guys have to check out a podcast called This Sounds Serious. And Donovan's gonna hate me for this because I got him into it and he hates it because he actually really does like true crime podcasts. I've never gotten into them. I'm not a fan of just the genre. It's very, I don't know. It's overplayed. I'm just not a fan of the format most of the time. But This Sounds Serious is a parody version of a true crime podcast.
Bummer. That's what I was going for.
And so it's a fictional story. And so the actual storyline is just ridiculous. Every step of the way is just completely ridiculous. But amazing. It's played off as being very serious. And so they'll have it just every step of the way is just clip for clip. Like basically they took a serial or another true crime podcast and just put different clips into it. And it is amazing. It's 8 episodes. But I really appreciated that. Like I said, Donovan hated it. He said it ruined true crime podcast for him. So that's my recommendation for the week.
All right. So we did get a couple other things on our ratings and reviews. Someone said, I don't usually listen to podcasts, but this one is worth a listen. Refreshing perspectives. And I do not believe this person was related to us or married to any one of us. That was good. Another person put a heart emoji in there and said, love these guys, keep it up. Also not married to any of us and nor related to any of us. So this is good, guys. We starting to get some more, the big Mo is starting to get on our side.
Yeah. Yep. So keep those reviews coming. So just
please do.
5 stars are preferable.
Download even if you don't listen.
Yeah. So if you have anything other than a 5-star review, you're going to want to send that to @thatrobjohnson on Twitter.
Yeah.
But 5-star reviews, absolutely plug those into iTunes or your podcast app of choice.
Yeah. So and we've already said multiple times how you can get a hold of us, so we don't need to run through that. So all right, guys. As always, when we get together, because we always say it's going to be really short, and then we get together and start talking. But it's always good. It gets kind of late, and it's always important when you get kind of late. You got to keep that energy up. That's why this episode is brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. As always, use the coupon code MAP for 20% off your Strikeforce Energy orders on StrikeforceEnergy.com. Now, the people at Strikeforce Energy, they reached out to us and they were like 10% off. But if Nathan says or more than 50 times an episode, everyone gets 20% off. And so far, I think I've railed through that. Every time I listen to the podcast, I can't stand listening to myself do that. But StrikeforceEnergy.com for all your energy needs.
There you go. Kick the can.
Yeah. It's hard to be lit AF without energy.
It's true.
It just is. True. It's a difficult conundrum you're in. You're like, I want to be lit, but I'm not quite lit AF. What do I need? Energy. StrikeforceEnergy.com. Boom. All right. Parting shots. All right. So my parting shot, I kind of already did it. I'm doing a recommendation. Again, go to the Colson Center. and you can get their series, Doing the Right Thing. It's a really great series. It's worthwhile to listen to and watch, and it's very entertaining and informative. But especially if you're a business leader or someone who's dealing with ethics at all, it's a very important reminder. So that is my recommendation for a parting shot this week. Rob.
Two things. First thing is Mitt Romney won the primary for Utah, so it looks like he's well on his way to being the senator for the state of Utah. So the state has been red since 1977, so that looks like that trend is going to continue. The second thing is over the weekend, I saw the second Jurassic World, A Fallen Kingdom. It was good enough for a bridge sequel, so I'm hoping that the trilogy does a nice job of tying everything up. But yeah, it was good enough. The two people who were in it, Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, I think she has like 3 or 4 names. They were very good, but it was just good enough. So I wouldn't waste a trip to the theater, wait for it to come on DVD, but it's definitely worth a watch.
I got that movie pass, yo, and just go for free. Well, not free, but you know what I mean.
When are they going to be a sponsor? That's the real
Movie
question.
pass? I know, right? Right now they're bleeding money, so I don't know if they have money available for sponsorships. But I mean, I could make them a sponsor. I got a little redeemer code for a quick sponsor they won't even know. This episode brought to you by Movie Pass. You can put Nathan Martin in your referral code. So Jeremiah and I were actually debating going together to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, but we had seen so many poor reviews on it that really caused us to shy away. So
it was basically like, get an extra hour and a half of sleep, or go watch this, what everyone says is a mediocre film. So yeah, I'll wait till it comes out on iTunes. I'll inevitably rent it, or even purchase it on iTunes. But yeah,
who purchases Jurassic Park? Is that you or me?
I think you have the 3.
Jeremiah and I share franchises, so
okay.
He's responsible for all the Star Wars stuff. I'm responsible for everything Marvel.
No, you're basically responsible for everything else.
Yeah, that's accurate, actually. You're a little bit of a mooch. I expect nothing less from a younger brother. But I did just get the Fast and Furious franchise.
There you go.
And okay, so I got to tell a fun story. So you guys have both watched Fast and Furious, right?
Yes.
Just the first one.
Wow.
I know this isn't a video podcast, but I think
there's an audible facepalm going on video right now.
All right. So anyways, for those in the listening audience who, I don't know, appreciate art.
The only thing he's ever seen is MASH. So
MASH and Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom. The problem is that Chris Pratt isn't in Fast and Furious yet. So if Chris Pratt was in Fast and Furious, he'd probably be all over it.
I would be all over it. I'd watch him over and over.
I think we need to start pushing that for Fast and Furious 9.
For what it's worth, I just plowed through all 11 seasons of MASH again. So continue on.
All right. Well, so I told my daughters and son we were watching Fast and Furious together, going through them, and so I told them that Paul Walker died in real life, whatever. So we get to Fast and Furious 7. So Furious 7. And so we're watching the end sequence, right? And my oldest daughter just starts bawling like a baby. I've never been so proud of my life. Because you know what? I'll be honest. I tear up every time I watch it. And in the theater, I was beside myself. I hadn't bawled like that for a very long time in the theater.
The end sequence, that's where him and Vin Diesel kind of like drive separately, right? Is that how it ends? Yeah. I've seen that clip, but I just haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, and they do like a recap of like his life in the films as a character. Okay. And they're going down the road kind of racing, but then they kind of like part ways on this. Like it's, yeah. there was nary a dry eye in the place when we watched it.
Okay.
So, anyways,
Yeah.
I was proud. It was a proud dad moment.
I'll add it to the list.
You got to put it on the list. All right.
So,
Jeremiah, your parting shot.
All right, so my parting shot is a recommendation for those who may not know. It is a Christian comedian, clean comic named Tim Hawkins. He's one of my favorite. He's got a lot of viral YouTube clips of different parody songs that he has written and performed. Different greatest hits and bits he's got on YouTube. Just really, really funny, but clean, and that's it is. He is deceptively funny when you think about kind of the negative impression some people have of Christian comics or clean comics. He's really great, but more specifically than just him being funny, he has a podcast called Potty Break, and my only issue with the podcast is that they kind of go through spurts where they'll drop 4 or 5 episodes and then they won't drop anything for a month or two, and it's kind of based around his touring schedule, but it's a lot of fun. It's really funny. But when I was overseas last year, it was one of the podcasts that when I got to decent Wi-Fi, I made sure that I downloaded and I kept up with, and it was really great and really funny. So what I did is I ended up sending him a letter from a fan letter, so to speak, from Iraq, and I didn't hear anything back about it. Didn't hear anything, and this was probably back in December. Just this past week, I got a giant box on my doorstep. And it contained a letter from him, a signed autograph from him, several mugs, every DVD that he's ever put out, a couple T-shirts, keychains. Like, it was basically just like, hey, we really appreciate your service and being a fan of the show and being a fan of the comedy, and we really appreciate the fan relationship there. And so they sent me all this stuff. So that is really just shows you, kind of who they are as people, and everyone that works with him. So class acts all the way around. But I already had some of the DVDs, so I kind of wanted to put out to the podcast that keep an eye on the social channels, and we may be hint, we may be giving away some Tim Hawkins DVDs over the next couple weeks. So keep an eye out. So if you have not followed us on social media at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, I would definitely encourage you to do so, and keep an eye out for some giveaways coming up.
Outstanding.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Well, guys, I'm looking forward to the next month delving into some of these leadership topics. It was great talking about business ethics with you guys, and I really love doing this podcast with you guys. We talk about it all the time. We wanted to talk about things that people generally don't talk about, in ways that they generally don't talk about them. I think we accomplished that, and I really just couldn't be prouder to be with a couple guys on a Tuesday night just wanting to record.
That's right.
So for the aforementioned Jeremiah Martin, for Rob Johnson, I am Nathan Martin, your host, saying good night and good luck.
I got the money in the pile. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on?